off from a digital summit talk that John did back in, I believe, was it June, John?
That's correct.
It was in June, late June, and I cannot tell you how many people we had come up and say, wow, I wish we could have spent more time on accessibility. And so we really want to take a deep dive into that, so we're very excited about this. Moving into the webinar, we're going to go ahead and show you, you can tweet this webinar. We're going to be keeping along live on Twitter as well. You can use the hashtag EOA11Y, and you can also reach us at Email and Acid, and then we also have our two experts here, John Thies, at John E. Thies on Twitter, and at OMG, it's only Alex, and that is Alex Ilhern, and I am Caleb Roundtree. I am not important enough to put on a handle for, so we're going to get this rolling here in just a second with one more quick slide and a question for you all. So we want you to be involved with this. This is not going to just be, you know, something that you sit back. We welcome questions. We want you to be able to post questions so that we can answer them at the end, so that you can have all of your questions about accessibility answered, as well as we encourage you to tweet along with the hashtag EOA11Y, and that is, or the hashtag A11Y is the accessibility hashtag. So Alex came up with that hashtag. You can all compliment him on Twitter. He's very proud of it. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and start up the poll question. We have a quick poll question for you guys to get this started, and we want answers for you. So voting is open, and we want to know, have you taken any steps to make your emails more accessible? We're going to let this stay open for about 10 more seconds and then close it off. One, two, and we're there. We got 67% of you. That is a solid 2/3. All right, so about 54% of you are yes on taking steps. We have 19, about 20% at no, and then we have about a little over a quarter of you saying, I want to, but I don't know how. Guess what? We've got some good news for you. You are in luck today. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this over. We're going to go ahead and get started. So first off, John, what exactly is accessibility?
Yeah, it's a good question. So thank you all for joining. This is a topic that I hold dear at heart, and I think it's definitely really important to talk about. So accessibility is really essentially making sure that people with disabilities, whether they're using an assistive device or not, can easily read the emails that you send out and that they don't miss out on important topics of them. It's really interesting, and like we're really going to focus on kind of the visual side of things within this webinar, but there's also other things that we need to consider, right? So like magnifiers, like which assist visually impaired users by making text bigger. Joysticks, which provide people an alternative to use from mouse-based navigation. So if they can't use their hands or something, eye tracking technology. So if they can't use their hands, where they use their eyes to move through and navigate through the OS and the applications and email as well. And then there's also that sip and puff technology, right? So where they're blowing into a little whistle, which then moves and interacts with the computers or the devices that they're dealing with. So really the big thing is if your emails aren't designed for assistive technology, people won't use them and people won't be able to get the information that they need, you know, in which we're going to be kind of explaining a lot later on. And to give you guys some numbers, because I know that marketers love numbers, which they can take back and say, hey, this is why we need to do this, is the fact that there's 285 million people in the world to be estimated to be visually impaired. Now, this is coming from the World Health Organization, and to put that in perspective, there's 325 million people that live in the United States. So if we're not considering that, we're abandoning a big part of the population, which is significant. And another part of it, another stat from the National Eye Institute is like in America only, by 2030, there's going to be estimated 2.2 million Americans will be blind, and then 5 million will have low vision. And so this is really, really incredibly important, and it's a problem that's not going away. And one thing I want to kind of point out too is that it's not like with this stuff, it's something that we need to consider too is it's not permanent disability. It's, you know, what happens if I break both my thumbs? How am I going to interact with my computer? What am I going to do? or if I have LASIK surgery or cataracts, something where I can't really see well, how am I going to interact with email and what I'm doing on my computer? So it's not necessarily like just a permanent disability, it could be temporary. But as you get in there, and I'll talk about it later, it's really kind of interesting how you can interact with, the computer and the email device, and it's actually kind of hard. And to give you another stat, which, kind of on the business side, is that people with disabilities represent $1 trillion in disposable income. So if it's not just the good of the will of your boss or whatever not wanting to do it, show them this stat. Maybe this will encourage them to say, wow, okay, there is an opportunity. Now, hopefully, we can get by with saying, hey, we're doing for the greater good. But if not, if you need one more statistic at your disposal, here's one for you.
Absolutely. So that makes sense. That number is huge, and that's definitely a reason why we're looking at this. I don't think anybody on this webinar is going to scoff at $1 trillion in potential revenue. So we talked a little bit about how many people we have on here who are, not have on here, but how many people we have across the world who are facing these troubles, what kind of amounts we put on this. But Alex, I have a question for you, and that's really, how does this affect the end user? So how do inaccessible websites and emails really make it harder for those who are looking at these problems to be able to interact with what we're sending out?
Yeah, thanks, Caleb. I think John's done a great job there describing, why we should consider accessibility as an issue and the truly staggering amount of people who face these issues. But as the next slide will show, we have to think past that and really think about the real issues that people face. So this is some tweets from a great article online, and these are real accessibility issues faced by people with disabilities you might not consider. So you can see the examples in front that dyslexia is a huge part of literacy issues around the world. I think I read earlier in the UK, there's 6 million people, about 10% of the population are estimated to have dyslexia. Also, color blindness is another one, especially with the rise of interactive email, seeing buttons and toggles in emails. I think is really interesting, adding double colored toggles, so we're not just relying on color or a visual indicator. And I think that another interesting point, which someone said to me almost in jest the other day, which is, why is accessibility an issue if people can just zoom in on web pages? But I think anybody on this webinar who has coded for Outlook 120 DPI will tell you that as soon as we're dealing with those sort of issues, it's incredibly complicated to develop or plan for. And when we're talking about people zooming in to 400 or 500 times their zoom, it's crazy. Your emails and your websites are not set up to deal with that. So these are the real issues that people are facing.
Absolutely. And so I think what really segues out of that is, so how do people with disabilities interact with an email on a mobile device, or how do we go ahead and make sure that we can make it a little bit easier?
Yeah, and I think that's really one thing that we need to kind of consider, is that accessibility is not only understanding how users engage with your emails, but it's how do they engage with the devices, right? And so like on these devices, like inherently stock, they come, iOS comes with what they call VoiceOver. It's kind of their accessibility tool. And Android they call it TalkBack. Now, I got to tell you, in kind of looking at accessibility and working, like I have an Android device, so it's not easy. Like it is really not easy. If you guys haven't done it, I would suggest like just going and trying to interact with anything on your mobile device with accessibility turned on. And I use the visual one. It's actually quite difficult, and I still cannot figure out, like through my research, how on an Android to read the entire email. I could only figure out that you had to double click on a text area in order to read that text area. It wouldn't read the whole email. So I definitely suggest for you guys to get an understanding of how people interact and what they have to go through and what they do. Go try it, turn it on yourself and see what happens. I mean, you can always turn it back, but it can get, I hope I'm kind of a smart guy, but I was flustered and kind of confused with it. So, because there's a lot of gestures and stuff that you do, so I definitely suggest going in and checking it out and seeing what it's really like. Now, in this research, what we found is really interesting, how Siri can be used for accessibility as well, and kind of really got us, Alex and I, and some of the others here, really rethinking about how we go about pre-header text and like what do we do with pre-header text? Because with Siri, and we have some examples here, it will actually read the email or part of the email to you. And so without further ado, what I'd like you guys to do though is just really kind of zone out everything around you, close your eyes, and really just kind of listen to the following clips that we have, and I'll kind of jump in between. But just take a second, close your eyes, just listen to how Siri interprets an email. And so the first example here is kind of your standard header, where it's kind of short and sweet, and we'll see what Siri, like how Siri interprets it.
Siri, can you please read me my last email?
There's one email message at 11:37. Support at emailacid.com sent you an email about accessibility in email webinar. It says, join our webinar as we take a deep dive into email accessibility in 2017. My account, https www.emailacid.com signal UTM campaign equals accessibility %20 webinar and UTM source equals HS email and UTM medium equals email and UTM content equals 2 ampersand equals P2ANQTZ whoopsie B06B YIY6FPHTNHCPHMFLTWWF Jack 9FKNJHBRL8MZ GV/9KBFRN4 at GUUKZS1TD2TW view online email.
That was a mouthful.
Yeah, so as you can see, so what happens is with Siri, the way that this application works, it goes and it grabs a certain amount of characters out of your email. And as you can see with this short text, it went down and started reading out all the links, you know, HTTP, blah, 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 all this stuff. And it was really, really hard to interpret it, right? And so if you're visually impaired, like how are you going to interpret that? So this next example is we've added a lot more text to it, and you'll see like all the code that's involved with it, but we just added way more characters to the pre-header text. And so kind of take a look and see how Siri interprets this next one.
Siri, could you please read me my latest email?
There's one email message at 11:49. Support at emailacid.com sent you an email about accessibility in email webinar. It says, join our webinar as we take a deep dive into email accessibility in 2017. This webinar will be a 30-minute long webinar on Wednesday the 9th of August. We will be covering accessibility in email, the real issues faced by millions of users who suffer from disabilities, and how we can further assist these users. You can expect a lot of actionable takeaways and a look to the future of email accessibility. If you are unable to attend this session, a recording will be made available for you online. Would you like to apply?
So you see how much better that is from an accessibility standpoint. And all we did was just add more content to the pre-header text. Now the beauty about this is that this pre-header text is invisible when you open the email. Okay, and like most, you know, email clients in their inbox view will take a certain amount of this. But if you have it all written out in a clear formatted fashion, it doesn't matter. It really does not matter like how much content you have in here. Now you don't want a whole lot. So what we found is it's right around 490 characters is what Siri will pick up and read. And so if you can keep that, that should not have any impact on deliverability, none whatsoever. And as long as you don't have bloated code, you should be okay. And you don't want your code to be over 100K in size, like the actual file size. But with 490 characters, it's not going to have that big of an impact. And so don't worry about writing all this stuff down. We'll be sharing this webinar online and stuff, so don't feel like you have to write all this stuff down. But the other thing I kind of want to talk about too is when we talk about pre-header text, there's kind of this hack going around where you can go and you can set up, have limited text inside of the pre-header text area and then have it blank space. So it's using these HTML entities, the non-breaking spaces, and then the ZWNJs. Now what this will do is, in a lot of them, it will take that join our webinar, blah, blah, and 2007 period and have a whole bunch of white space, so that's all you see. So you can have a clear, concise message. Now you can do that still with Siri. Like Siri won't read those, but those characters are counted towards that 490. So it really kind of limits what you can have in here. So from an accessibility standpoint, am I going to tell you which one is preferred? Absolutely not. I think that's kind of a judgment call up for you guys for what you want to do. And you might do it one way for one campaign, another one for the others. We're just here kind of sharing information and giving you an understanding of how it works and whatnot. But this has completely changed my mindset about what pre-header text is and how much you put in the pre-header text.
Absolutely. And so moving on from that, we've talked about a couple of different ways that we can impact things. I think the Siri one is one that really just resonates with a lot of people. I know as somebody who's not deep into it on the email marketing side, it's wonderful to hear these kind of tools. But really, what are some quick wins we can give to make emails more accessible right now?
Yeah, and this is one where it's so easy to do. And again, the code that I'm going to be showing you guys here coming up is, don't worry about writing it. We'll share this this deck with everyone. But the thing is, like, it's so easy to do, and all the stuff that I'm going to show you today has no negative impact on rendering at all. And so the first one is with the HTML tag. And again, this stuff can be used with email and websites and landing pages, so the same concepts can be ported over, is adding the language tag to the HTML, or the language attribute to the HTML tag. And what this does is it gives the screen reader or the interpreter information about what the language is and how to interpret and how to read the email and the content of the email to your subscribers. And then the next one is the title tag. This gives clarity to what the email is about and what's happening within it. So as the reader goes through, it will start reading and it will say title, accessibility title, right? And it will start going through all the blocks of content. The next one is table. The role in the table. So tables historically were built to show you data. So columns and rows with data, I kind of look at it as like kind of an Excel spreadsheet. So it's really formatted for that. But when you put this role presentation on a table, which we obviously have to use with email just because of the lack of support with other things, it's really, really impactful. And I have another sound clip here for you guys that the generous folks at Rebel, or Mark Robbins at Rebel, have put together to kind of show you guys the impact of just adding this one attribute to a table. So if you don't mind just closing your eyes again and just really listening to the interaction and how the reader will go through content with the tables.
HTML content without row equals presentation. Group. Table 3 columns. 1 row. You are currently on a table. Blank. Column 1 of 3. You are currently on a table. Heading level 1. This is not very accessible. You are currently on a heading level 1 inside of a cell. Blank. You are currently on a table. End of table. You with row equals presentation. Heading level 1. This is much more accessible.
See, so as you can see, just by adding that one attribute to the table, cut that reading time down by 1/3. And it didn't go through all the table datas and like all this stuff. It went straight to the content because of basically the role of presentation. It doesn't contain any data. Now, if you do have data in there, then you probably don't want that role on it. But in most cases, in an email, we're not generally showing specific data in general. But again, your campaigns might be different. So just add that role. It makes the screen readers a lot easier and a lot quicker to go through the email and understand what's happening. The next one is alt text. So this one's really important. So what happens is if you have image that doesn't have an alt text attribute, it will actually read the URL of that source. It will actually read like http:// . So even if it's like in this example, a clear.gif, always put that alt tag there and keep it empty. Because what will happen then, it will just skip right over it and it won't do anything. Now obviously with images that you do have that do represent maybe a CTA or some type of graphic, try to be very specific in the alt text about what that is, because obviously they can't see it. So the more descriptive that you can be within that, the more helpful it will be to those interacting with the email with the visual impairment. The next one is really avoid the title attribute. Now we know that This is used quite a bit within email and HTML landing pages and all that, but for accessibility, it's really, really bad because what happens is it actually breaks up the flow of the reader. It breaks up the flow completely. And so don't ever use a title tag. That's going to be my suggestion. Never use it. Use the alt tag or the alt attribute to really describe, because that's really the whole point of that attribute, is to give alternative text for what you're trying to represent.
Absolutely, and just a quick note to everybody out there: we will be this webinar is being recorded, so you will be able to share this with team members. We're getting a couple questions on that, so I wanted to go ahead and clear that up. And moving on, so Alex, one of the questions I have is, how else can we help those with disabilities? I mean, we've gone over a lot of solutions here, but can you take us through some more specific examples of what we can do?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about accessibility, and when everyone tends to talk about accessibility, we tend to kind of get locked in a little bit to screen readers, which I think is a fair thing that happens, purely because it's something that we can quickly and actionable. We can quickly change it. You know, it's simple for us to do. It's short code snippets, and they just make sense. But to me, accessibility isn't only about screen readers. We're talking about people with different kinds of disabilities as well, and disabilities come in all shapes and sizes. When we're talking about different disabilities, we're talking about dyslexia, we're talking about ADHD, we're talking about maybe people have been in an accident and they have an issue with their hand or hand tremors. And here's a question for everybody today here on this webinar: have you actually tried to navigate your email journey with your weaker hand? It's really interesting, and I don't just mean interact with your email. I mean go through your whole email journey, sign up to your email, confirm your subscription if you have a confirmation, and then actually use your emails with your weaker hand. And it can be very frustrating, especially if we tend to be linking up bodies of text or stuff that we don't really expect to be linked, just to try and drive those few % of click-throughs. I don't think it's really worthwhile. I think that sometimes we need to take a step back, and really we need to think about how we can change these people's lives with simple, actionable things. We should never, ever cancel out accessibility for the sake of good design. And some actual actionable things we can take away from this. Avoid center aligning text. It can be incredibly tricky for people to read if they do have dyslexia. And as I mentioned earlier, the current estimates for people with dyslexia in the world are fairly varied. Some are as high as 17% of the population, because a lot of people don't realize they even have dyslexia, and a lot of people have not been diagnosed. And center aligning text can really, really, really make it hard for people to read. It's off the top of my head, 76% harder for people to read center aligned text, which is crazy to me. We're also talking about the new fashion of lightweight fonts and grey fonts. And as a base rule, we encourage keeping a minimum of 14 pixels for a font size. And if you're going to use a light font, minimum of 16 pixels. A great way to test this is just to take a step back from your computer or your device and try and read it from distance. For me, I take my glasses off and I try and read it. And if I struggle, I know that we've done a bad job with making it accessible. And when we're talking about light grey fonts and using light fonts on white, the minimum darkness for a font we can use is the hex code of 767676, which you can see here. Anything lighter than that will not pass a contrast test to be used on a white background, which is another thing which I think is super interesting, because I'm sure everyone here has had this issue of this new fashion of design with white backgrounds, light grey fonts, and I mean, my eyes are okay, but I struggle to read a lot of them.
Absolutely. And so another quick question for you here, Alex, and I just really want to kind of look forward here so we can know what to expect in the coming time for our marketers. What does the future look like for accessibility in email? I mean, where are we headed right now? Because we've seen so many things like what Siri can do, what we can do with these little hacks and things like that, but where are we headed with this overall direction?
I would like to see us move into an area where everyone has accessibility on their email checklists. That's what I can see us moving towards, because I see it being a quick and easy fix that has, as John mentioned earlier, it has implications not only on making people's lives easier, it can have an implication on your business revenues. And for $1 trillion is obviously a very, very big number. I wouldn't say no to $1 trillion. But when we talk about the future of email as well, we're going to have a little bit of a crossover into another topic. We talk a lot about interactive email. And this next slide is a great example from Paul Airy, who is a fantastic person when it comes to email accessibility. This is his interactive email example, which he's kindly given us permission to use, which has an interactive switcher. So it enables people to increase the font size or change the background color and really, really help with legibility of emails. And I hear a lot from people that interactive email is great, but we don't actually have a proper purpose for it. And the only reason we do it is so we can flex our development muscles and we want to make cool, showy emails. But this is a real life example of an interactive email being used in a great way.
Yeah, one thing I want to kind of talk, like really point out with like the future of this is standards. I mean, that to me, like there's web standards, there's WC3, right? There's all these organizations and they're trying to do it, but I don't think there's really a focus on email standards, and that's one thing that I would personally like to do here at EUA as well, is really start driving towards what those standards are. Because again, like the stuff that we do to the code has no impact on rendering, and it's all completely just the experience of the subscriber. And so the future of this, where are the standards? That's what I wanted to see.
Yeah, I agree. And we've also seen big pushes around the world for accessibility standards in websites, like you've mentioned, specifically in America. The ADA taking a big look at how people use websites and if it is ethically right to deny people the use of websites by not making them accessible. And although it would make our lives slightly harder as email designers, developers, and marketers, I think that is absolutely the way we should be going. I think people should be making their emails accessible. It's not only is it unfair to not do it because it is the changes we can make are simple, but we're talking about stuff that is just benefits everyone. Making your email simpler to digest is a win-win for everybody involved.
Yeah, not even to mention too, Alex, just to add another point is like those people in pharma and healthcare and all that, like there's actually laws and requirements, you know, even education about accessibility. Mm-hmm. And so if we're not thinking about that, you know, kind of what you mentioned in the whole journey of things, right, is what does that look like? What's the entire journey? And like from a legal perspective, from everything like we talked about, using your, you know, your opposite hand, like how do you interact? How do you engage? And like how easy is it for them to do? And is it consistent? Like we talk a lot about, you know, responsiveness within email. But how many times have we gone and clicked on a link in an email that's responsive, you go to a landing page that's not, right? It's the same type of experience with someone with a visual impairment or a disability. Like making sure that that experience is all consistent will certainly help, you know, the conversions and driving people to where you want to go and what you want them to do and how you want them to engage with your campaigns.
Absolutely. It's like putting a driveway only halfway to your garage at that point, if you're going to.
Pretty much.
So, all right. So, well, thank you so much, everybody. We are now going to roll into the Q&A section here. I've got a couple of questions lined up, but and I see some of you putting in some questions now. So, we're going to take some time to answer some questions here, about probably 10, 15 minutes, and then we'll go ahead and wrap this up. So, I'm going to start with one of the ones that we got here today. So, we got a question about what's up with so many people using image-only emails. Isn't that a bad practice?
Alex, I don't know if you want to take it or I can. It's up to you.
Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, I'm in the line of a lot of email developers who will adamantly say that image-only emails aren't good. We don't like them. I don't like them. I think it is just not a great way to send emails. But with that being said, completely, people do have to do this. You know, people with lesser resources or templates that are already set up, and there is definitely a use case for it. My advice to people that are doing that would be to ensure you are properly setting descriptive alt text, making sure your images aren't massive and legible on mobile devices, and making sure, as John mentioned earlier, to leave blank alt text on images that are purely decorative and don't provide any value to people, because that will force screen readers to skip over them and not just bombard people with the reading of alt text when it reads it out and it goes something like alt text, image1.jpg, image2.jpg, icon3.gif, and it's just tedious to use and it's tedious for everybody involved. So if you are going to do it, make sure you do it properly.
Yeah, I want to point out too is that, you know, with this, like, I know that retailers are notorious for this, you know, and having all image designs, and I know there's a point, there's certain instances where you have to have it or where you need to have it in order, because a picture's worth 1,000 words. But I just hope that accessibility kind of helps shift that mentality. One, from a deliverability standpoint, you know, like, what are you trying to hide, versus like just getting a better experience, like adding more clarity to what you're trying to sell within that email, especially on, you know, using assistive devices like the screen readers. You know, we heard it from Siri. Is the more descriptive and more context that you can put around it, the better the subscriber is going to understand what's happening and what you're trying to do, what message you're trying to convey to them, and what you want them to do. And, you know, I look at this email as a driver. It's driving people to that landing page where landing pages do the conversions. So if you're not able to drive those people to the landing page, well, you're not being effective with that. So it's kind of something to think about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so we've got a couple other ones rolling in here. A quick one for you here. How do title tags break up the flow of screen readers?
Do you want me to do that one, John?
What's that?
Would you like me to do that one?
Yeah, go for it.
So basically, title tags, I want to distinguish between the two title tags we're talking about. We mentioned using the title at the top of a HTML document, which we highly recommend, not least for just giving your web page a title in a browser. It's just a nice little thing. But we're talking about here titles set on anchor tags, and the screen reader is going to read through the email and it's going to go, link, level 1, link, sign up now. And then it's going to, if you have the URL set and an alt tag on an image and stuff like that, the title is purely going to be duplicating content you've already got. So it's going to say, link, sign up now, title, sign up now. And it's just going to be tedious and it's just going to duplicate content all the way through. And so we recommend not using the title tag in regards to inside the actual HTML, but at the title tag at the top, definitely still use that. And I hope everyone really appreciates my screen reader impressions as well, because I've been really practicing them.
You think he's joking. I mean, he's been calling us on Slack and everything and doing it a couple times a day. So, so while we're talking about these, I got to ask, because we've gotten this one a lot, how does the Siri hack work for other platforms? I mean, because we talked about it in iOS, it works very well there, but where does it branch off from there? How does it go? And
you know, that's a good question. Like, I was trying to look into that with the Android, and like I mentioned, I could not figure that one out yet. So if anyone has any insight on that, please feel free to tweet at me. I would love to hear it. We're still researching that, but what we found, though, is through our platform and the testing and stuff that we've done, it has no impact on what's actually displayed within the pre-header text, whether it's Outlook or Android or, you know, Yahoo, AOL, even international clients. Like, it has no impact. Like, it doesn't stretch anything out, and then when you open the email, it's hidden. So again, this is something that I was shocked to hear, and it's completely changed my mindset and like the focus of what a pre-header text should be and how much content you put in it.
Perfect. And so we have another question coming in, and this one's one that I really love to see because it's one that we've specifically seen pop up a lot in our own research and what we've been doing. How would you suggest revising content so it's not overwhelming for people with ADHD? Because there are a lot of different ways you can get distracted in this area or somebody can take away. I know there are different things with animations. Alex, you were just talking about this yesterday. You want to start off on this one?
Yeah, sure. So ADHD and ADD are incredibly varied issues that people face, but there's some general rules of thumb we can go down with. Try and remove all like the verbose vocabulary you have in your emails and try and make it like really sell stuff, because that's just confusing and extra for people. You know, you want to just keep a focused and clear message. We don't want to be adding. We want to be careful with animations. It's something really interesting to me that I've been reading up on. Is I've always loved animations. I love putting them in stuff, and I love using CSS for animations. However, subtle, constant animations can be incredibly distracting for people with any kind of attention deficit disorder. Really crazy animations, like if you have a blue button and you hover over it, it instantly turns red. That can be incredibly distracting for people. We'd encourage people to use subtle animations, subtle hover effects, clear, concise messaging, and really just cutting down your emails and just thinking about how people actually want to digest that data. Because if you're selling a bike, people don't need 6 paragraphs about why the bike is great. They want the information straight away.
Absolutely. And I think we have another question that really kind of backs up into this one a bit, and so I wanted to get your thoughts on this while we were segueing through. But do you consider video and email an answer for accessibility, or only for a small segment of the challenged readers that we're talking to?
So with this one, this is a great question, because video, like, and we talk about not only in email but landing pages. So video is becoming increasingly more like widely used, right? It's a powerful selling tool, like YouTube and all that stuff, right? But one thing you have to understand is, if you're going to do video, you have to close caption it. Like, you have to close caption it. Like, that is so important. Like, that's one of the things that we found in our research, is that that's what people struggle with the most. Is like, they think the video is great, but if they have a hearing impairment, they can't hear it. What are they saying? What message is it that you're trying to show off? Like, what are you trying to tell me? I can see it visually, but are there words behind it? And so closed caption, always closed caption those videos.
All right, perfect. And I think that's really important. And it's just easier for everybody when you caption them. I mean, you don't have to open up everything fully. It's just a really nice way. It's one of those best practice things. And another one that we're talking about when it comes to best practices, is it a good practice to put the subject line in the email's title tag?
That's a good question. Alex, what are your thoughts on that one?
I wouldn't consider it best practice to do it either way, but it surely couldn't hurt. However, bear in mind that it could read both of them. So we keep it simple with our title tags at the top. I just put email and acid in it because it describes what we're doing, and it lets people, gives us a browser tab title. I think it's just simple. If you have a short subject line, I think that would work, but if you've got a long subject line, emojis or stuff like that, it could be very daunting to people. So I think just keep it simple with that while being descriptive is probably what I would consider best practice to do.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would definitely recommend not doing it, because as we saw with, Siri, like, the screen readers will literally go through the content and go through the text. So if you have the same message there twice, I think you're kind of missing an opportunity there to really add value, or really kind of market or interpret what the email is about, right? Because even if they're similar, I would probably kind of go against, like, having them different, right? But maybe make them, like, relevant, contextually relevant, but make them different. Maybe you could have a short subject line and, a more descriptive title tag, and what would be really cool is if they flowed together. That'd be kind of interesting, right? So, but it has to make contextual sense for it.
Absolutely. And so I'm going to kind of switch gears on you here, and this is a question that we got that I think is just so crucial, because we can talk all day about accessibility, and I know that a lot of people who are on this webinar either came into it with an understanding about how important this is, or at least are leaving with an idea of how important it is. But how would you best discuss and pitch this to a client? Because not everyone is as savvy or is as into the accessibility side of this.
Alex, I don't know if you have anything before I go or not.
Could you repeat the question? Sorry, I kind of cut out there. Didn't hear very well.
No worries. How would you best discuss and pitch accessibility to a client, and why it's important and why they would need to do it?
From me, I just get in front of people and I talk about it, because once I start talking about it, I don't stop. But I think it really needs to be sold as something that is incredibly simple to implement. The fixes that we've put forward today as being the quick, actionable code fixes, for anyone who knows HTML, it is really simple to make those changes in your email. And the two use cases are simple. Not only is it incredibly easy to do, and it makes people's lives easier, it can make you more money as well. If people are driven by money, and the stat that's going to keep coming up that John put out there, the $1 trillion disposable income by people with accessibility issues, is a crazy amount of untapped potential income to your organization or company. So for me, it's more of a why not do accessibility, but I can completely understand why you would need to pitch it to people.
So my response to this, and again, I'm going to be, because it's so important to me, and it's just, again, like what Alex said, so easy, I would be like, don't be a jerk, right? I mean, it has no impact on the rendering, it has no impact on the outcome, like on the visual representation. Well, so font sizes and color and contrast do, but from the code perspective about how screen readers do it, it's so easy. Like, don't be a jerk. Like, think about it. Like, these people are impacted, right? And we're talking about accessibility, and we're talking about, you know, human rights and all this stuff. Don't be a jerk. I don't know. It's blunt. That's how I would really pitch it, I guess. I mean, I don't know. Like,
no, I was about to pitch that over to you, John, and hope that you would use that line, because that's one that you've used a lot lately when it comes to accessibility. Personally, for me, when it comes to, so I head up marketing for EOA, and one of the things that, whenever I take something to John or someone else and say, hey, we need to do this, one of the first questions I'm asked is, well, what is the benefit for us? And when you go into this from a marketing perspective, the idea that there is that large of a percentage of people out there who are not going to interact with your emails or going to struggle with them, they're not going to necessarily buy with you. They're going to go somewhere else if they're having trouble. So the main thing that you can do from that side of this is go look at how many extra people we can bring to the table for our product, for our emails, for whatever we're trying to do. Look at how much more reach we can get. Why would we limit our own list? Why would we limit who we send to? Why would we open this up? And really, after that, if that's not enough, don't be a jerk. It's funny, but you know, it really comes down to, I mean, if this was, you know, if this was one of your friends or someone you loved, wouldn't you want them to be able to read the emails you're sending them? I mean, it's simple. So, but I do understand that a lot of people don't get that. So hopefully that helps out a little bit more. We've got time for about one more question here. We got this one pretty early on, and then I saw it come up a couple times, so I wanted to pitch it over to you guys. And the one that I'll use is, I've been told pre-header text should be 50 characters. But would you recommend using the first 50 characters for these viewers and continue on so it works for readers?
Do you mind if I take it?
go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so we were experimenting with this a lot leading up to this webinar, trying to figure out what is the best way to do it. But we kind of settled on there is no best way to do it. We wouldn't really, any of the examples that we provided here, we would use. I can tell you what we're going to use as the person who gets to control the email and assets emails. In the future, we're probably just going to run with a long descriptive pre-header because it makes the most sense to me. It's no negative subtraction away from having a short pre-header because most people's pre-headers are full of code and, you know, like view online links anyway. So by having a long descriptive pre-header, we're going to go with belt and braces, make sure we're covered for both inbox previews and screen readers and Siri and however Android does it. We want to make sure we've got everything covered.
Absolutely. And so just before we wrap up here, I want to read one thing. We just got in a, not a question, but a more of a comment that I think really succinctly puts why this is so important. And thank you, Bonnie, for sharing this. It says, I'm not classified as disabled, but my vision is getting worse as I get older. If I can't read it, they use great fonts, I simply close it and won't interact at all. That's the price we're looking at here when it comes to accessibility. I mean, it is really, if you do not make it accessible, you lose that percentage of your list. And I mean, that's, again, we're talking $1 trillion in buying power here. We're talking big numbers. And not only that, we're talking about not being a jerk. And so, as John so eloquently put it. So, John, Alex, I'd love to, John, you can go first. I'd love to welcome your thoughts just as we wrap this up on accessibility.
Yeah, no, I just want to thank everyone for attending this because to me it's so important, it's so critical to do because we don't want to alienate people out there as email marketers or marketers in general, just people in general. Like, never alienate people So I really appreciate all your time, the effort that you guys have put into this, and hopefully you have some good takeaways that we can make email better.
Yeah, really, I just want to echo John's sentiment. It's something that we're all at EOA incredibly passionate about, and something we've been babbling on about for a while and probably annoying people. I'd also like to say that we have had a ton of questions that we couldn't get to. So if you did have a question that we can answer, please reach out on Twitter at email&acid, and I will spend all evening answering your questions. I'll make sure none of them are unanswered. Send them to us on Twitter, and I feel awful that there are unanswered questions. We just had too many to get through.
Absolutely. So I want to thank everyone who came and got involved with this. I can't tell you how much it means to us. I mean, this is a topic that is so close to us at Email and Acid, and really personally to John and Alex as well. So I'm really thankful that we could take time to go through this. Please, I would love to echo that sentiment. Please reach out to us with your questions. We want to hear from you. We want to be able to answer this, because if there's one thing that we want to do, it's to be able to open email to all. And I mean, that's just such a fundamentally beautiful thing. So thank you all for showing up. This webinar was recorded. We will be posting it online as well, so you will have access to that. You can share it with your team. And thank you yet again. We will see you soon, and be on the lookout for future webinars. Have a great day, everyone.